Well, welcome to Spero Day, everybody. And I have been in this series for the past month called Light of a New Year and kind of looking ahead of having a great year. And we're still early in the year. And so today I want to close this series talking about healing the wounds that we've just carried too long. Some of us have been walking around with these wounds. But what if this could be a year when we finally begin seeing some healing like we've never seen? And it's not because life got easier, but it's because we chose to step into it. And I don't mean like a surface level healing or just coping mechanisms, but real soul deep healing, the kind that touches wounds that, again, we've carried, some of us, for years. The ones maybe we've ignored or minimized, or we've convinced ourselves, they weren't worth tending to. And healing internally, it's not just emotional, but it's deeply spiritual. And I think Christian spirituality, one of its cores is about healing. Now, here's the deal. Some of us don't even recognize how much healing we need. And it's because we've lived with certain struggles so long, they just feel normal. An anger that flares up too quickly, an exhaustion we can't explain, just this ever need to prove ourselves. We can't get close to people. And these aren't just quirks we have. These actually might be signs that something in us has not healed. And they show up in our relationships. They show up in our emotions. They show up in how we experience life. So really, what is healing? And maybe what is it not? Well, as a minister, I think healing is sacred. I think it's this ongoing journey to becoming whole. It's integrating these wounds, into our life. It's not denying them, and it's allowing God's presence and our human resilience to kind of meet. And in Christian spirituality, healing always moves us to a deeper connection with ourselves, with others, and of course, with a godly and divine presence that actually calls us beloved. And so it's not a transaction for a better life, but it's this participation in renewal where our spirituality is not about certainty, but it's about a growing trust. And healing is never a quick fix. It's not about praying harder, claiming Bible promises. It doesn't mean we reconcile with every person who has ever hurt us. It doesn't mean we don't struggle again. And it's certainly not spiritual bypassing with positivity, promises, literalism, but it's trusting something is new. And maybe it's actually always been in us, certainly about who we are meant to be. And so for some people, healing means tending to past wounds, family hurts, betrayals, traumas. For others, it might be breaking free of harmful patterns that have just kind of nipped at you. Maybe it means breaking away from that, making peace with something you pushed away. And maybe it's even grieving and coming to terms with dreams that didn't come true, a love that didn't last. Healing might even mean that you learn to trust again. You learn to love again. You learn to stop running. You finally exhale. But whatever healing is, it is always about stepping into this life that's actually waiting for us and how we then are being made whole. Now, some of you don't even like the word healing. It's either maybe it's too abstract, or maybe you just, you don't view yourself as somebody who needs Healing, well, maybe you like integration, bringing every part of yourself into wholeness. Maybe you like renewal or restoration, reclaiming what's been lost. Maybe you like transformation, awakening, growing into a fuller, freer version of yourself. Maybe you like the term making peace, carrying your past differently with centeredness, with grace. You know, it's maybe it's showing up and believing that healing is actually possible. But, one of the questions might be, well, David, how am I going to know where I need healing? Um, you can start by asking some questions. Do I avoid certain emotions when they feel overwhelming? Do patterns in my relationships, do they leave me hurt or disconnected? Do I struggle to trust others? Do I struggle to trust myself? Is there a actual part of my story that I never talk about, I don't like talking about? Do I feel exhausted emotionally or spiritually? And maybe if any of that resonates, it's not about your failure. Maybe that actually is the inner nudge moving you towards healing, to see the wounds in you with compassion, not shame, and recognizing that healing isn't just possible, but it's actually meant for you. So, for too long, a lot of us have carried broken relationships, carried lost dreams and disappointments, and we've kind of tucked them away into the shadows of our heart, into our life. But maybe this year, we can begin to see restoration by taking steps towards greater wholeness like we never have before. Because here's the deal. Your healing, it's not just for the lucky, it's not just for the strong. Our inner healing, it's for all of us, not because we've earned it, but because this is the spiritual human trajectory. And I think it's how Christ saw us. So, we often we move through life unaware of how much our past shapes us, unaware of the childhood wounds that whisper, hey, you're not enough, or some sort of heartbreak that convinces us, hey, love is too risky. Certain failures that make us afraid to dream again. Psychologists have a phrase for this. It's called emotional residue. It's the unconscious imprints of past shame that shape how we think, how we feel, how we relate to the world. And there's a great psychologist, Kristen Neff, down in Austin, and she's done a lot of research on self-compassion. And she found that healing is deeply tied to how we treat ourselves when we're hurting. And her research shows that the more self-compassion we offer ourselves, the same we would offer to a good friend, when we do that, we experience lower anxiety, lower depression, lower PTSD. But many of us struggle to think, well, I don't even deserve that. So this is why I love the intersection of our ancient Christian tradition and the merging of psychology, which is shaping, because all of us are meant to be loved, to be seen. All of us are meant to be restored. And when we can see ourselves through new eyes, especially spiritual new eyes, things change. Go all the way back to when Jesus invites his first disciples to follow him. And he sees them. He doesn't approach them with expectations, conditions, He met them right in the midst of their ordinary, imperfect realities. And these young men were living under Roman rule. There were all kinds of social hierarchies. There were religious expectations dictated by just a few leaders. Faith had become rigid. and it made people feel unworthy, which had to feel exhausting. You would have had to have felt this weight of shame and the weight of survival. And you're just human then or now. And it just can lead to this heaviness or a grief, unspoken battles. Yet when Jesus meets them and invites them, he never judges them, he never corrects them. He actually, in John 1, says this great question. He goes, "What are you looking for?" This is such an amazing question of our human need to reflect, to look inside, to go, what am I looking for? That question stirs self-awareness. It stirs us being honest with ourselves. And in our tradition, when Jesus shows up on the scene, he shifts the whole faith forward beyond these rigid structures, beyond these biblicistic, narrow, literal translations. And he just invites people to something more expansive. So healing never requires us to be different. Rather, it reveals who we've been all along, or certainly meant to be. And like the disciples, maybe we're searching for something that we can't name. Maybe we're longing for renewal or carrying burdens that we were never meant to bear alone. And so we don't have to have it all figured out. You don't. It's not about fixing something. And Christ always meets us at our exhaustion, our pain, our lives, and says, what are you looking for? What are you looking for? Maybe it's the first time that you answer that honestly. Maybe you recognize that I'm seeking peace. I'm seeking restoration. I'm seeking belonging. I've been waiting for this. And so, what happens when what we seek, right? We want something. What happens when it's tangled in our past? What happens when a dream shatters, a relationship we had that leaves us broken? So healing is never about moving forward. It's actually about sitting with what's been lost. It's about acknowledging disappointment and broken dreams, relational wounds. It's not avoiding them by some platitude up ahead. And the reality is, this is true of my life, some of us minimize our losses or we bury those hurts deep somewhere. But what if naming them, saying them, looking at them, what if that is the first step towards healing? What if it's learning to carry the whole thing differently? So let's turn to what, happens in broken dreams and disappointments. And maybe there's some restoration in all of this. So I want to talk about three places we can heal. And so the first one is healing from our past, right? Whenever we search for something new, we are inevitably going to come face to face with our past. When we begin to acknowledge a move forward, we're going to see our wounds show up. Sometimes it's hard to look back because to look back, we also have to deal with wounds or scars. And for many of us, those wounds, those scars come from the families we grew up in, certain dysfunctional, generational trauma. Maybe it's being loved with conditions. Maybe it was a very rigid religion or Christianity. And a lot of that led to feelings of abandonment, not measuring up, and this affected our trust. And so some of us pushed things away when we needed them most. Here's the deal. We don't always hold on to the past because we want to. We end up holding on to it because it's familiar. Even the pain can be familiar, and letting go, gosh, that's uncertain. That's scary. But what if you loosen the grip on that old kind of hurt? And I'll tell you what, healing doesn't mean, it never means pretending the pain never happened. And it's not about positive thinking. It's not about treating scripture like some magical spell. You claim a promise, you pray something away, you ask God to, take it away. No, spirituality is about engaging with our lives, with our wounds, with our humanness. Spirituality is about leaning into discomfort. That is the deep work of spirituality and healing. Spirituality is never about bypassing your life or your pain, but it's about the journey of moving forward in it, moving towards wholeness. I love what Revelation 21:5 says, where God says, "Behold, I am making all things new, not replacing, not discarding, renewing them." And so healing is not this overnight demand or this promise we claim. And then here's the deal. We only get to do this life once. We only have one life to wake up. We only have one life to heal from the hurts. We only have one life to give our attention to this, one life to awaken, and then to move towards healing. So where do you start healing the past, right? Well, maybe you need to seek help beyond yourself. It was a therapist that really helped me. So whether it's therapy, a mentor, a spiritual director, a wonderful church, a group of people, sometimes we just need other people to do it. Maybe you need that. It's also learning to practice radical self-compassion. Listen, healing takes time. You can't rush it. Again, you can't claim it or, a promise. But it's about staying patient and resilient in it and holding that you are worthy through this mess. And then, as I often say, you name it, you speak about it, you face it. And maybe when you start facing it, naming it, acknowledging it, that is really the first step in just lowering this hurt's power. Listen, I don't have all the answers. I don't. But I do know this. You're not alone in this. And maybe, just maybe healing has already begun. Here's the second kind of healing we need. It's healing our past disappointments. It's healing broken dreams. Many of us walk around carrying the weight of what life could have been, the relationship that didn't last, the job we could have had, whatever. Over time, these disappointments, they can shape us, right? In a way of how we then see ourselves. So what do you do with a dream that never happened or some hope you had, you saw it crumble? One of the hardest parts of healing is grieving the life we thought we would have. It's hard to let go, isn't it, of something that you wanted to have happen, or let go of a version of yourself you wanted to see. That's tough stuff, and you can't rush it. Yet, within that grief, at least in my own life, I've seen there's an opening. There'll be a chance to dream again. There really is. Dr. Brene Brown's research, all her research on resilience, all her studies showed that hope is beyond an emotion. Hope is actually a practice. It's the ability to set goals, to persist, to actually move towards believing new possibilities. And healing always starts by grieving fully and honestly. It might mean you have to redefine what success is, right? Maybe it's shifting from why did this happen to wow, what's still possible? So healing from disappointment, it doesn't mean ignoring the pain. And if you've been trying that, it doesn't work. It means actually refusing to have it have the last word. It means beginning to take small steps of trust, of action. And so really what this is, it's moving beyond having hope to living into it. Again, hope is not something we hold on to. It's something we live into. It's not waiting about, things to get better, but it's engaging in a way that moves us forward. Healing is never passive. Healing is actually something we do. And there is a difference between having hope and doing hope. And hope, right? We often see it as a feeling. It's a belief, a faith promise of something we hold on to. But I don't think that's what hope is. Doing hope is about taking action, small intentional steps, even when we don't know where it's going to lead. It's the difference between wishing and working, waiting, and walking forward. And doing hope always empowers us to participate in our own healing. That is spirituality. It means trying again, opening up again, and maybe believing that our moves matter. Listen, we can't control everything, but what we can do is learn from it and move one step at a time. And transformation always happens by action. So here's some of the ways you can do hope. Here's some things I've done. Cultivate your curiosity. Listen, when a door closes, hope now is inviting you to ask, okay, what's next? Instead of, just focusing on what you lost, start to ask, what do I still love? What makes me alive? Grieve, of course, but begin to allow yourself to, dream again. Take small steps of action, courageous action. So this is the second one. I don't know, sign up for a class, move towards a goal, take small little steps that begin to do and create hope. And then surround yourself with other voices, other people, voices of possibility. Seek out the people who encourage you, the books to read, the podcasts to listen to. Look for stories of resilience that remind you, hey, I'm not stuck here. And so hope isn't a promise that everything is going to go as planned, but it's the assurance that something good is still possible. And when we live from that place, healing begins. It does, a step at a time. Here's the third healing, and this is the toughest one. It's about healing from broken relationships. Some wounds are just tough because they come from the people we trusted or loved or thought would always be there. And when a relationship breaks, whether it's through betrayal, abandonment, or for some weird reason, it just grows apart. That is a hurt that has no rituals or timelines. It's hard. And relational wounds cut us so deeply that they do take time. It takes tremendous amounts of courage, but it's not just about moving on, right? It's not. We don't heal by pretending it didn't matter, but by grieving what was and creating a space for what still can be. And healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean you get the relationship back. And we sometimes think it means fixing a relationship and it will be whole again. But sometimes that just doesn't happen. And so closure in that, it doesn't come always from the other person realizing it. Many times it doesn't. So it has to come from within. And when you forgive, it's not about a reunion. It's about restoring ourselves. It's about setting down the resentment we carry so we can move forward. There was a study done back in 2020 that found, this is why self-compassion is so important, that people who learn self-compassion obviously to themselves, they're more likely to forgive others, not because they condone the harm that was done to them, but because they ruminate less over the thing that hurt them, which then lowers resentment. And let's be honest, right? This is hard. Some wounds from people, they still ache. Certain names, certain memories, they still, bring something to us. So healing doesn't mean that those things necessarily disappear, but over time, they loosen their power. And so you can actually take some steps in doing hope for relationships, broken relationships. So one thing, let go of your need for an apology. Some people are just not going to be able to give that to you. And if you stay there, you're going to stay stuck. But when you decide you are worthy of an inner peace, and you heal that makes a difference. Begin to rebuild trust. Whenever we're hurt by somebody, can be a trust thing, but you can't always control what they do. So it's about rebuilding trust for yourself, rebuilding a trust, learning to listen to your instincts, learning to honor your boundaries, because you deserve to be healthy. You deserve healthy relationships. And then maybe it's for you creating healthy boundaries. Healing doesn't mean you got to keep a door open for every relationship that caused you harm. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is you have to create distance. So boundaries aren't about punishment. They're about your own self-protection, kind of ensuring that we don't keep exposing ourselves to something that harms us, right? So give yourself the permission to step back and prioritize your own well-being. And in doing all this one step at a time, hope begins to come. Love and connection, they are still possible. And when Jesus was following his disciples, not only did he say, what are you looking for? But come and see. And so healing is about learning to see differently, right? And seeing something newer, something whole. And when you do that, maybe, just maybe, that begins to be enough. So let me return to this whole self-compassion and empathy, because it's key in your healing. First, self-compassion, right? Healing is going to be hard if there's lots of self-judgment. And so too often we treat our pain like we failed. Our healing means we're weak, but healing is not weakness. It's part of the human spiritual experience. So self-compassion, it will always help us move through healing and grace rather than shame and guilt. And so if you could begin to treat yourself just like you treat the kindness of your own friends, this changes us. And so the more we can hold ourselves with kindness, you begin to build spaces of healing. So self-compassion is key. But then there's empathy, right? Empathy, how healing expands beyond us. And as we soften towards ourselves through self-compassion, we begin to soften towards others. We begin to listen more deeply, love more freely, and we create a space for others to show up as they are. Because healing isn't just for us, it's a ripple effect that touches others. So again, what if you and I decided right now, this year, this is going to be the year that I move towards healing like I never have before? And not because I have to, but because this is what the human spiritual journey is. It's about becoming whole and centered and deep. And it's what I believe. I believe Christ sees us that way, always has, always will. And as I said, he didn't say to his disciples, you got to meet a standard. What he did say is, come and see. Come and see a life beyond pain. Come and see healing without shame. Come and see who you actually are when you are loved and not having fear write your story. So as I've been saying, healing is not about erasing the past, but it's about stepping forward, the action of hope. It's about courage, and it's about holding on to that we are meant for something more than survival. We're meant to thrive. And I'll say it again. I don't have all of the answers. I don't. But I do know this. You don't have to do this healing thing alone. You don't have to have it all figured out. Healing is not about getting it right. It's more about showing up. It's more about taking the next step, and it's allowing God's presence, God's grace to meet you. So maybe this is our year. This is our year to step fully and bravely, without hesitation, towards healing, because you are worthy of that, and because you are loved, and because there are greater things to come. So may you go from here knowing that healing is not a destination, but it is a sacred unfolding. May you trust that healing is not about fixing yourself, but it's about embracing the wholeness that has been with you all along, that you are held, known, and that you are loved by God. And as you walk from here, may you sense the quiet presence of Christ saying, even now, come and see. There is more ahead than you ever imagined. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Peace. I'll see you next week.